The shadow at the window. It started when I was about 7 years old. My family lived in a modest house at the edge of town. Behind our backyard stretched an expanse of forest, thick with tangled branches that seemed alive under the moonlight. My room faced that forest, and though I loved watching the swaying trees, I hated the nights. One evening I stayed up late, engrossed in a book under my blanket. It was past midnight when I heard it, a soft tapping on my window. At first I thought it was the wind, but the sound grew persistent, deliberate. My heart raced as I gathered the courage to peek out. What I saw froze me in place. A shadowy figure stood outside, its outline barely visible in the moonlight. Its head was tilted, as if it were trying to peer inside. My house was 2 stories tall, and my room was on the 2nd floor. There was no way anyone could reach that window without a ladder. I screamed, and my parents rushed in. By the time they looked, the figure was gone. They dismissed it as my imagination, but I knew better. For weeks I slept with the lights on, and though I never saw the shadow again, I often felt watched. The Whispering Well. Near our school was an abandoned well, hidden behind a crumbling stone wall. The older kids dared each other to approach it, spinning stories of how it was cursed. They said a girl had drowned there decades ago, and that her spirit lingered, whispering to anyone who got too close. One rainy afternoon, my friends and I decided to investigate. The air was heavy with the scent of wet earth, and the path to the well was overgrown with weeds. When we reached it, I felt an odd stillness, as though the world had gone silent. We leaned over the edge, staring into the darkness below. At first we saw nothing, just endless black. Then faintly we heard it, a soft, indistinct whisper. It wasn't any language I knew, but it chilled me to my core. My friends laughed nervously, but I couldn't move, mesmerized by the sound. Suddenly the whispers grew louder, angrier. A gust of cold wind blew past us, and I swear I felt a hand brush against mine, pulling me toward the well. Panicked, we ran, vowing never to return. For years I had nightmares about that place, hearing those whispers in the dark, the doll in the attic. When I was 10, my family moved to a larger house. It was old with creaky floors and an attic full of forgotten relics. My sister and I loved exploring, finding trinkets that seemed to tell stories of a bygone era. One day we discovered an antique doll, dressed in a lace gown with glassy blue eyes that seemed to follow you. My sister adored it, placing it on her shelf. That's when the strange occurrences began. At night we'd hear faint giggles, though there was no one else in the house. My sister swore the doll moved, its head turning ever so slightly. I didn't believe her until the night I saw it myself. I had woken up thirsty and was heading to the kitchen when I passed her room. The doll, which had been on the shelf, was now on the floor, sitting upright and facing the door. We tried to get rid of it, throwing it in the trash, but it always found its way back. Eventually, my parents burned it, and the disturbances stopped. But I'll never forget those glassy eyes staring into my soul. The man in the mirror. One of the most terrifying experiences of my childhood happened when I was 12. Our bathroom had an old, ornate mirror that my mother loved, but I always felt uneasy around it. Its surface seemed to ripple, as if it were alive. One night I was brushing my teeth when I noticed something off. My reflection didn't quite match my movements. It was subtle at first, a slight delay, but then it smiled, a sinister grin that I wasn't making. I froze, unable to look away. The figure in the mirror stepped closer, even though I hadn't moved. It raised its hand, and though mine remained by my side, its fingers touched the glass. I screamed and ran out, refusing to use that bathroom for weeks. My parents laughed it off, but I knew the truth. That mirror was a gateway to something dark, the night of the blackout. The final story from my childhood still sends shivers down my spine. It was during a town-wide blackout, the kind that made the stars shine brighter, but left the world eerily quiet. My family gathered in the living room, lighting candles to ward off the darkness. Around midnight, we heard a knock at the door. It was odd. No one visited at that hour, especially during a blackout. My father opened the door cautiously, but no one was there. As he closed it, the knock came again. louder this time. Oh, we decided to ignore it, thinking it was some prankster, but the knocking didn't stop. It grew more insistent, almost desperate. Suddenly the candles flickered, and a chilling wind blew through the house, extinguishing them. In the pitch darkness, I heard a voice, low and guttural, whispering my name. When the lights returned hours later, we found scratch marks on the door, deep and jagged. To this day, my family refuses to speak about that night, but we all know it wasn't a prank. These stories aren't just memories. They're scars, reminders of a childhood touched by the inexplicable. They taught me that the world is far stranger and more terrifying than we'd like to believe. Even now, as an adult, I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, expecting to see shadows at my window or hear whispers from a forgotten well. The past has a way of lingering, its horrors waiting to resurface.